Yes, sir.
5:59.
All right. Here we go. 6 o'clock. Hi, everybody. Ready or not? I'm calling the meeting to order for the EVIT Governing Board, 6 o'clock on Monday, April 14th, and I've asked Dr. Metcalf to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Turning it over to item 3A, presentations and recognitions, presentation by the EVIT Education Foundation. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the Governing Board, one of the things we're very blessed with here is to have a partnership with the foundation that truly looks at putting students first. I want to give Larry and Denny credit because since I became the superintendent, they have taken the foundation from an entity that was actually running well to an entity that's excelling. And I think Larry and Denny are going to explain a little bit of that tonight. So it's with my pleasure that I introduce both Larry Christensen and Denny Brown, the Executive Director and the President of our EVIT Foundation. Gentlemen.
How y'all doing? So, good. My name's Denny Brown. I am the Executive Director of the EVIT Foundation. Now, I've been on the board since 2017, but we've never had an opportunity to talk like this. So thank you for the opportunity. You know, I got to tell you that I've been on a bunch of boards and commissions throughout East Valley. I was even, elected to the school board in Scottsdale. Wow. And
my condolences.
No kidding. I was 6'8" when I got elected. So through all those years of service, there was a phrase that I've heard about 1,000,000 times, and it just makes me nuts. We've never done it that way. Oh, please stop. Well, good. Did you do it right though? But I'm here tonight to thank you. I want to thank you. I want to thank the administration. I want to thank the staff of EVIT. I want to personally thank our board. And I want to thank you guys. Because together, we have opened a door to allow us to do things that have never happened before. We were talking, I think it was 2019, we gave out 76 scholarships. Oy vey, step back, here we go. And we were pretty excited at the time. Last year, with this wonderful cooperation going on, we gave out 1,330 scholarships.
Wow, nice.
This year, as of today, how many have we given out? 820 for this school year already.
Great.
It's massive. There's a byproduct to all this. So yes, we're giving out scholarships, but this relationship with EVIT, the foundation, and all the partners has created a sense of partnership. It's also created trust. And with that, I feel confident that we can move forward, taking care of a lot of kids for a long time. Cool beans. Now I'd like to introduce my educated friend, the board chair. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Larry Christensen.
Denny's very proud, and we're very proud of giving out 1,300 plus scholarships. Somebody has to pay for those scholarships. Edith sends us a bill all the time. We will probably, as we look to this year, be raising and giving to students, EVIT students with need, close to $400,000 with Tools for Success and scholarships. So first of all, thank you for coming to our fundraising breakfast the last 2 years, because that's one of our major sources of resources. But the word for us is sustainability, because more scholarships mean that we have to secure the funds to do the job. Grants and donors all in place so that we don't lose that student that's going to enter the workforce. We placed a little trifold at your place. And it talks a little bit about a change in focus that we're going to have to help the workforce, one of urgency. Now, the only statistic that we'll zero in on, average age of some of those key technicians, right in the 55 to 60 age group. Now, all of us like our houses cool and the plumbing to work. But it means we have to have trained technicians in our workforce. We're proud as a foundation to look to EVIT as a big part of that solution. But here's what happens. When about 25% of your student body comes and they live in poverty, it's awfully easy to have a barrier. Whether it's a fee or some other issue. That's why we give the scholarships. We remove the barriers. As we look to the future, we want to team together because we don't know what will happen. Will those technicians need better training? What will artificial intelligence do to all of this? How will it change in the way we have to support a young EVIT student who already is short on funds? You're well positioned. You have a top administration, quality teachers, excellent programs in multiple locations. But there's still going to be change. We still have to work together. Now, I was preparing these items for tonight, talking about the changes that will come and how much smarter we all have to be. And then my ice maker stopped working. And a young man came, and I was looking for the wire, you know, that would always go up to show it was full. But the words were circuit boards, air codes, and a lot of other things I didn't understand about the 9 computers in. That was a microcosm for me as to what these young people will face as we look at moving forward. Now, what can we do together? You can help us with maybe a name of someone who just cares about career and technical education, willing to give some resources to help. Maybe a foundation, maybe a community group. And I'd be wrong not saying this, maybe even administrators and governing boards who would want to give just a little bit to help a student. Because we face that never-ending challenge. We're with you, we're a partner, but our little slice is just having those students who need that help the most. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for being visionaries and creating and supporting and developing and leading a place called EVIT, which is the solution to our East Valley workforce. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And likewise, thank you and your team for all that you do to support our students. That volume is truly impressive. We are so grateful for it and excited for this continued collaboration and partnership. So glad we could work out the presentation today and loved hearing about it. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
And if I could, Mr. Boyle?
Please.
I'd like to, again, thank Mr. Christensen and Mr. Brown and the whole foundation board, because we sat down probably 3 or 4 years ago and talked about what we expected out of EVIT. And talked about how if we were going to become who we expected ourselves to be, and we were going to have a partner that was going to come, beside us, that we were going to have to look at things, to Denny's point, differently. And they have done exactly that. The process that used to be in place to get scholarships approved was laborious, time-consuming, and actually wound up having families just choose not to participate. You go to our fee days now, and you'll see Denny standing there at the fee day, and if there's questions or concerns, the parent goes talk to Denny. Denny gets on his cell phone, approves the application, and it's done by the time the kid has left. And so you all have really worked hard to make the system student-centered and user-friendly, so thank you for that. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, our next item today, item 3B, TSA scores data presentation. Dr. Wilson.
So it might feel a little bit like Groundhog Day, because I think this is our third run at it. But we've done some internal cleaning up of data and presentation, and I think what we're going to present to you tonight is far more user-friendly and far more clear to understand. But before we bring up Dr. Frimmer, I'd like to give Dr. Doolin a second to kind of talk through what you all might be expecting to see, so that when we get into it, it makes a bit of sense.
Good evening, board members. It's a pleasure to be here. So one of the things that we took into consideration is the feedback that we got at the last board meeting, and we really wanted to put that to use. So you will see in your packet, you have a backup, and we simplified the information somewhat as Dr. Metcalf had requested. Instead of 3 areas, though, we did 2, because we took a look at the rubric, and the rubric that you guys approved was truly, we're looking at the state average and then the EVIT quality adjusted average. The rubric states that the program needs to meet the adjusted quality adjusted average in order to be considered a quality program in the TSA category. So you will see that there's just categories. You either met it or you didn't meet it, but we also, that first column is going to be your state average. That is the state average prior to the adjustment. Dr. Frimmer is going to go through the presentation, and she will tell you how the adjustment occurred. She does have the backup data with her as well if you have additional questions. But we have decided that we're just going to show you a picture in time. So we're going to go through, you have all the backup, but we're going to go through specific districts, and we're going to give an example, much like we did with the persistence, of a positive and a negative within every district. And we talk about a negative that's just a place for improvement. And EVIT is first on the docket, and we have several places of improvement. So I will turn it over to Dr. Frimmer.
Good evening, members of the board. But as Dr. Doolin mentioned, we took your feedback. Actually, we rewatched the comments and then reworked the presentation of the data. And actually, it ended up being almost exciting in how much we were able to tell from the data when we simplified it. And so we thank you for the feedback and for the chance to come back and kind of reshare what we've learned from the data. And I will actually we're going to start with EVIT, and I'm going to use EVIT to explain the data, and then I will go through and we'll do 1 or 2 off of each of the other districts. Okay, so looking at the EVIT example, a couple of things I want to point out. So there's kind of an understanding of the sheet itself. But the first column is the statewide pass rate. This means out of all the students in the state who tested, how many of them passed. But second one is the number of students who tested at EVIT or at the sending school. Then we look at the pass rate. This is the pass rate the state records. It's how many students passed out of how many took it. The challenge with us using that pass rate is that if I only test 3 students and 3 students pass, I'm at 100%. But what if I had 12 students who should have tested? And so it is a misleading pass rate, and that's where in our rubric, as Dr. Doolin mentioned, we looked at the adjusted pass rate, which is the second column, the last column. We left both of these on your papers because it does show a pattern, and it shows some really areas for conversation. So looking at us, there's a couple of things. There's the all early testers. Those you'll see generally in the 3-year programs where we were testing after 2 classes instead of 3. We mentioned that a little bit last time, that we had a sequencing issue where we were testing everybody in Auto 2, but the completer class for Auto is Auto 3. So that's an example. So we've corrected most of that this year. By next year, we expect all of those issues internally to be resolved, but you will see a few of them throughout some of the sending districts as well, which is an indicator that they're not testing in the completer sequence. not always a problem, but worth discussion, and that's really why we highlighted it that way. The second one is the greater than 100%. The greater than 100% is a combination of students either testing early or testing late, but not necessarily testing in the completer class again. So again, not always a problem, but always worth noting, and so that's why we left it on there as well. And you'll notice the coloring is simple. Green was they met, and yellow was they didn't. And that's really, so looking at the patterns, and we did that because you can easily look across and look at the patterns to see what's happening as well. Like the state says they met, but really they didn't, and that's kind of how we did the color coding. So looking at us, we pulled out a couple of examples that are noteworthy. For example, early childhood. Early childhood has 100% pass rate according to the state, but really it's only 88%. And 88% is actually lower than the state average. And we're saying the state average is our meets. Now, if you look at that so there's a 12% drop, so you've got about 3 students maybe, but it's still 3 students that pulled us down. And so that's where we're able to look at the difference. In some cases, you'll see much more dramatic drops than that. At EVIT, we were relatively consistent. We do test all of our students, and actually, if you want to see, you can come next week. We're doing TSA testing. We've got over 3,500 students testing for TSA next week during the week. So we test every student who is supposed to test.
I do want to add.
We do try to test every single student who can test, but if like you look in early childhood where we went from 100% to 88.89, so obviously we didn't test every student because we're missing some of those. That could be for a variety of reasons, and sometimes it is just that the student is absent the day of testing and then they do not test in the makeup. It is our goal that we catch them all. So that is what we're trying to do, is to make sure that we test everybody. But the bigger concern would be if, let's say, we were only testing the 24 students, if you see the number of students that tested, what if we were testing only the 24 we knew could pass? Right? So that's why we want to always look at the adjusted, because we want to make sure we're being true to who we say we are, and that those in the completing course should be taking the test so that we can see how they're performing.
And in contrast, technology maintenance, this is what we would say is exactly what we want it to be. There's 25 kids who tested, all of them passed, and if you notice, the adjusted rate is 100% as well, which means there was only 25 kids who should have tested. So everybody who made it into the completer class tested, and everybody passed. And so.
Can I ask a question on that data, Dr. Firmer? I'm sorry. So when you look at the diesel engine repair, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't too long ago that we were functioning well below the state average. Is that accurate?
Correct.
That's actually exciting to see that's good for us.
Yes, and we are going up. Diesel, again, is one where we're testing some before, some after, so there's an adjustment. We have corrected that one, I know, this year. Should be more accurate for next year's data. Okay. Any questions on EVIT before I move on? Okay. So you notice that as we redid the data, it tells you a lot. If you compare how many students were testing, the transition from green to yellow, and compare it, there's a lot of information in the simplified data. All right. So we're going to start with Higley, actually, and the reason being is Higley is really in good shape. So I want to give a shout out to Higley because their data is great. Notice how much green is on the paper. Notice the consistency between the 2 columns. There's not a lot of drop off, which means they're testing most of their students. They have a few areas to pay attention to, the couple of yellow ones on the bottom where they're not meeting the state average. But overall, they're testing their students and their pass rates are consistent. And so, like I said, we chose them as the first one. The other thing you'll see on all of the sending districts, the charts on the bottom, if they have it, these are programs where there is a test, but they didn't test anyone. And what you want to see there is what Higley has, which is 0. There was nobody in the class to test. If there was students in there, then the conversation would be, why didn't they test them? And you'll see a number of the districts have that situation.
Mic on. I'll just leave the mic on. And if you notice at the bottom with Higley where it says at Williamsville High School Software and App Design that they had 0, that would mean that they had 0 students in that completing course. So that's another one that gives us information we want to watch, because this is something that comes up when we look at our persistence data. The students may not be matriculating to the final course. I believe in that one it was just that they took a pause in a previous year, so they don't have students that have made it that far within the program. But that's something we always pay attention to as well.
So again, like I said, quite a bit they can tell from this, and what we're gonna do from our data is take a look back at the areas that were yellow and start thinking, what does it mean and what can we do with it? And that's the same recommendation to the districts. So I'm gonna jump to the next one. Chandler, like I said, and this is just a piece of Chandler's, but we looked at a couple of examples in Chandler's. They did have fluctuations between the green and yellow in a number of areas, which means their state average is higher than their actual average. And so that's one for them to look at. Looking at, for example, film and TV, they went from 100% pass rate in the 24 they tested to a 68%. That's a 30% drop, which means there's probably about 10 students that should have tested that didn't test for them. So the question for them is why? Did those students not test? What happened? And so that's kind of where that gives us an indicator. Like I said, on the other hand, software and app design at Basha High, another program, 22 students tested, 100% passed, 100% should have tested. So kind of a nice, that's the ideal to see that. Obviously, it's hard to get to that 100% in every program, but that's the perfect program in a sense. It's doing what it's supposed to. So, all right. They did have one of these zero testers. Notice Chandler High School has air transportation. There were 17 kids, in the completer class, and not one tested. So a conversation is why? What was the reason that whole class didn't test? And like I said. Okay. All right. So jump to Gilbert. All right. Similar to Chandler, a lot of green at the state pass rate. Yellows start to show up when we add in some of the students that didn't test. Looking at bioscience, 27 kids tested, they were at a 74%, which is okay because it's above the state average. But all of a sudden you add in the students who didn't test, they go down 20%. And so a conversation, so that's, again, 5, 6, 7 students it might be that didn't test. How come? And how did that pull them down? And so, like I said, the students not testing could be they were absent, but it also could be practice. And so that's kind of conversation of who's testing and making sure that we're testing all the kids that qualify. Sports medicine, on the other hand, 89%, it's almost identical, if you notice, meaning probably one student difference from there. And they were at a solid pass rate.
Again, I want to make sure that the board understands, we're just giving you a snippet. We recommend that as we're going over this, that you look in your board packet because you have the complete picture of a school and you can easily identify the amount of yellow in a quick glance versus the amount of green in your packet.
Yeah, look at, here,
All right, jump to Mesa. Mesa was a little bit different, and as we looked at, as a group, as we looked at Mesa, it was a little bit different because it wasn't a lot of inconsistencies. Green stayed green, yellow stayed yellow in a lot of cases, so we started to look at what else we can tell from Mesa's data. And so, for example, the ones that were consistently yellow, we pulled out on here the automotive at Red Mountain and the home health care aid at Skyline. Those are not the same though, even though they're both consistently yellow, there's different information there. Automotive technologies, they only tested 5 students. They put only 20% pass, that means one student tested there, And then they went down to 16%, which means maybe there was another one. So the whole class might have been 6 kids and only one of them passed. That's different than the home health care aid where they tested 29 and 83%. So now about 25%, 25 of those students passed. They still dropped, so there were still kids they didn't test. But notice how the yellow, you have to look at the numbers, it actually tells you something different between those two. And so, but quite a bit of information just from these few numbers. But in contrast, the software is an interesting one because the state pass rate is only 63%. They were consistently above it, but they did drop down a little bit. Unlike Stagecraft where they went down 40%. They went from 100 to 60%, which means probably 6 or 7 kids didn't test that should have, and how would that have impacted had they tested?
I believe they have a second sheet.
Right, oh yes, I was given. And then Mesa again has engineering at Westwood, 29 kids that should have tested that didn't. And so the question is why did they test? Do they test in the second class, which I didn't show up? how come they didn't test the engineering? So it just becomes a conversation piece, like I said, especially something, as Dr. Doolin said, to watch. Is that happening every year? How come a class is not testing? All right, questions on Mason? All right.
Dr. Firmer?
Yes.
If I could just for my clarification. So the graph at the bottom indicates that there are students that were in the course that conceivably should have tested but did not, we don't see that they did test. So as an example, you see Westwood and the precision, the Westwood and the engineering has 29. Then you go over to
Red Mountain.
Red Mountain in the bioscience has 20. Those students should have tested, is that what I'm understanding, or?
Yeah, so with the bottom chart means nobody in that class tested. So Westwood Engineering didn't test anybody, but yet they had 29 that should have tested. The difference of the ones on the other page, they tested somebody. They all tested someone, that's the difference.
Thank you.
But great clarification, thank you. Yeah, so Westwood is probably a little more concerning of a conversation, because how come not one student in that class tested, would be the conversation.
And you see that also on there, you'll see there's 6 in sports medicine at Red Mountain.
Correct.
They also didn't test in sports medicine.
Right. All right, we'll jump, oops, I skipped Tempe. All right, Tempe, Tempe had relatively consistent data. What was interesting with Tempe was that their data fluctuated by school. If you go down the list and you have the full data of Tempe, they start out very green and then they turn yellow as they go. So they have conversations, they should have their conversations by school in a sense, because there's noticeable difference as they look at the different schools. You know, we pulled out a couple of examples. Corona, software and app design at Corona, another perfect program. Not surprising at all, I know that teacher, but like I said, it's another program where straight across everybody who tested, passed everybody in the class, passed. You know, unlike marketing at Marcos Deniza, where you've got a 20% drop, which means again, 7 or 8 kids probably didn't test that should have. You know, and there is a lot of opportunity, realized, to do makeup tests, to have them do it within the time frame. So the conversation, how come those kids didn't test at all, is the conversation on those.
And with that complete packet in front of you, to Dr. Firmer's point, you will notice in Tempe is an area that you see significant differences between campuses. So that is a conversation that we'll be having with Tempe when we meet with them, is that they're going to want to take a look at that data and look at the drops on certain campuses. Why is that happening on those campuses, and what can they do to potentially fix it moving into this next academic year? Because some of the campuses were doing great, and then all of a sudden you can see certain ones dropped.
So again, just another insight into how much, when we clean this data up, how much we were able to pull from it, so. All right, I'll jump into Scottsdale. Very similar in Arcadia Sports Medicine, 12 kids tested, it's 100%, you know. On the other hand, Desert Mountains Software, only 6 kids tested, and out of that only 6%, 66. So you've got 4 out of the 6 total that passed. So again, a different conversation, especially when you're thinking that's the whole second class only had 6 kids test. So it becomes a conversation. It actually is a great connection, and remember, our goal is to connect all of this data eventually. It's a great connection to the persistence conversation as well, when you start looking at the numbers that actually tested. All right. And they did have, which was interesting, their software and app design tested on the other page, but it did not test at Saguaro High School. So how come software and app design at Saguaro, which had more students, didn't test at all?
So Dr. Wilson asked me a really important question that I do want to clarify on this as well. So TSA is really important. It gives us an understanding, it's a state test, we're all taking the same metric, so it's easy to make some comparables. I do want to point out that there are certain programs where this would not be the testing we would be looking at to show success. And I want to give you an example. Certified nursing assistant. We look at that one, we look at the board pass rate on CNA. We look at the amount of students who took the CNA exam and how many passed in that completing course. So that is another one where we're not bringing that to you yet, but that is one where if there's a third-party exam, that is required for the certification, we really need to be looking at that more stringent, more rigorous exam for how well that program is doing. Because the program if you can't get the certification, you really didn't meet the needs in that area in certain programs, nursing assisting being one of them. So I do want to clarify that.
Mr. President, just a question.
Please.
So with the CNA and the nursing program, and it's a third party, is the state using that as the TSA or does,
The state does not use it as the TSA. They
Okay.
use the TSA as the TSA.
Okay.
But passing the TSA does not get you the nursing
Right.
assistant certification.
Right.
You actually have to pass the
Yeah.
required testing through the State Board of Nursing.
okay, very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Which is why our goal in the end is to pull this all together into a combined rubric for the program where you can
Yeah.
see, because it may be that a program struggles at the TSA, but they have exceptional certification rates or something. So we do want to look at it as a whole picture. The TSA in a lot of ways is the baseline. It should be the lowest level of what a lot of our students do, especially if you look at the state pass rates of 90%. I mean, there's an expectation that they pass the TSA almost first. And so that's kind of how we look at it. And we can drill down into the TSA data, and we do that internally to the subject matter. So we can actually look, well, you didn't meet the state average, what areas were you struggling? So you can use it as a curricular guide as well.
And I do want to say that EVIT Automotive is an excellent example. That is one of our programs that when I started here, we were not even on the board with TSA, weren't even close. I think for the first year or two, and then they really honed in on making sure that we were teaching and ensuring the students got those skills they needed and the information they needed to be able to pass the TSA.
Yeah.
So districts can do that. This data really can help you, guide you of an area that you need to improve.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Perfect. All right. So Queen Creek, relatively consistent data, lots of yellows that stay yellow, greens that stay green, so not too much jumps. A couple of jumps like finance went from 90 to 78, meaning 3/4 students didn't test that should have, and that would have pulled them down. On the other hand, sports medicine, they had 25 kids test. They did drop, but they didn't drop outside of the pass rate, although it is one, given the numbers, I would watch if I was the CTE director just to kind of make sure it doesn't drop again, because 1 or 2 students more and they would have dropped below this average. So when you start talking about small numbers, it doesn't take a lot to drop them down.
And another thing I want to point out, if you look at, this is the differences between high schools. On this sheet, you can see Chrisman High School, sports medicine and rehab. They tested 20 students and only 30% passed, and even the combined was 30%. When you compare that to Queen Creek High School, 25 students tested, so a similar amount of students, only 5 difference, and a difference of a 30% pass rate and an 84. So that's one that you would really want to, if I was looking at the data from Queen Creek's perspective, I would be wanting to do some mentoring there of what's happening at Queen Creek versus what's happening at Chrisman.
Different teachers.
They did have one program, again, an engineering one, which is interesting, where they tested none, realizing engineering is one of the 3 sequence programs, so how come the students are making it to that 3rd year in many of the schools and not testing is an interesting conversation, because a number of the ones where they tested no one was in engineering. All right, jail homes. Also relatively consistent data, consistent highs, consistent lows, but if you, to kind of note, looking at graphic design at Combs, the data is identical in the 2 columns, meaning they tested every student that they should test. It did stay above the state average, but very close to it. So again, it's one where 1 or 2 students could push them either way. On the other hand, stagecraft was at above until you added in the students that didn't test, and so giving you that indicator of a shift. But Cave Creek, notice there's not one that changes from yellow to green or green to yellow in there, so it's interesting, and their numbers are relatively consistent. The programs they're strong in, and the programs that they're struggling. So it gives them good indication of where to kind of look at, like what's going on in digital communications. They only had 4 kids and they weren't above the average either one. So it gives them a good indicator of things to look at.
I want to point out, I think it is exceptional. If you look at that last one with sports medicine, if you look at all the sports medicine scores in the other school districts, for them to test 34 student and 100% met the benchmark. Again, that's one that I would say we need to look at what are ways that we can learn what they're doing in that program to help the other satellites perform to that same level. They're doing something right. I will tell you, one of the things I believe that why you see such consistent numbers at Cave Creek is one of our satellite districts that does some block programming I think there's 7 up there. Is that correct? Am I counting right?
Yeah.
I believe of those 7, I believe 4 of them are blocked, meaning they do 2 hours in 1 year, much like they do here, so that they have the student, if it's a 2-year completer, they have them in the completing course during that first year. I know for a fact their culinary is a blocked program. So you'll notice they stay at 85 and then they just drop to 84, and they tested 64 students.
65 probably.
And they're one that, given how strong they are in their strong programs, they would look at their ones where they're not, like business management, what's going on there. If they're so strong in the others, clearly they have a culture that's strong for CTE, so there's other challenges within their business management for them to look at. All right, one more. All right. ALA was a little bit different data on this. We have to have some conversations with them, because you'll notice almost all of their programs either tested early or tested out of sequence. So really this one, we're gonna do some more exploration with them to figure out, are they testing everybody first year? What is the reason that their data was not consistent in showing testing in the completers?
And with American Leadership Academy, I do want to point out that if you look at the applied tech, you have a lot of early testers there. I think that they're new to the CTED, so I really think this is just a learning opportunity for us to sit down with ALA and go over the data and go over some of the expectations on testing from the state when you do TSA. Who should be taking the TSA? When should we be giving the TSA? Those types of conversations. I would say I don't believe that testing out of sequence was in any way malicious. I think it was being brand new to the CTED and learning as they go. They have been very receptive to meeting with us and learning.
Aircraft mechanics.
Right. And they did have one that they didn't test at all, like I said, so just a conversation. But I think, as Dr. Dillon said, though, there's so much in this data that both we and the individual districts can take a look at and start having those conversations of what it means. So, I do thank you guys again for pushing us to keep reformatting it, because I think where we ended up showing us a lot more than we even expected to out of the TSA data. So with that, if you have questions, I kind of ran through a lot of districts fast, so.
Well, that's very much appreciated for the sake of efficiency. Thank you. And before I open up the field for questions, just really appreciate the entire team bearing with us and being patient in getting this data out here. It is a very important quality indicator for all of the programs, both here at our central campuses and then also at the satellite. So having both this volume of data, but also your presentation, thank you so much, and the clarity in how we're able to interpret it is really helpful. So I appreciate that. What questions do folks have for Dr. Firmer? I have a question. So you mentioned, and I'm glad you phrased it in this way, you noted that, some of these pieces are points for conversation, and I'm glad that we're approaching this in this way, because data is always used as a tool for continuous improvement. Can you share a little bit about what the conversations might look like, and how, 2 things, 1, we can support both ourselves and all of the partner districts in continuous improvement, but then secondly, how we can network folks together to cross-pollinate, because if we're seeing some hundreds in a certain program at a certain school, I want other programs at other schools to be able to learn techniques. So can you just please speak to how these next steps might progress?
So I'm going to jump in and answer
Please.
that question, because this is one of the things that from the inception of us looking at a quality rubric was the goal to be able to come together as a CTED and use the best practice and evidence-based practice when we're talking about who are we pairing together and why are we pairing them together. We've been going a lot by, hunches, this person has a good program. Well, do we have proof that this person has a good program? This teacher knows is doing everything? Is there persistence where it needs to be? Is the TSA where it needs to be? Are the certifications being earned? And in addition, is the teacher have recent or relative industry experience to continue that professional development and being a mentor and teacher to other teachers, right? So in order to do that, we had to gather all the information. So the goal is we have 2 other pieces that are going to be coming to you, and they're going to come to you rather quick, and that is the certifications. And then after that, it's also going to be, I don't want to say teacher quality, but the teacher professional development and industry experience. We're looking for some specifics in there. And then what our goal is to really bring the CTED together and look at this and say, okay, who does have an exemplar in sports medicine? Here's the person we should maybe do a PD on and invite all the sports medicine teachers here to EVIT and have that person, maybe it is Cave Creek, presenting on what they have done to bring their TSA rates, to bring their persistence rates. How did you get where you are? What are some of the secrets to success? But in order to find where those exemplars are, we have to have the data. Because in the past, I think we've kind of just been throwing a dart and saying, yeah, they're a really good teacher, but we really didn't have all of this in front of us to say, this is a teacher or a program who's performing above across the board, let's learn from them. So our goal is to be able to bring that to the CTEDs and potentially set up some small groups, even bring in some industry. So construction, for example, it would be really great when we looked at the construction trades and some of the TSA as well as the persistence to bring in an exemplar, and then also with the industry support from some of our trade partners to do a presentation of what is relative, what they really want to see, and then what is that teacher doing to get there in the classroom, and put those PDs on. So that is where the ultimate goal is with this data, is to be able to work as a community in the East Valley CTED. So that is our goal. We have done it a little bit. We have sent some of our teachers to other programs where we have seen exemplars, especially some of our new teachers, and we wanted them to learn from the satellite. We have not seen as much coming the other way, but we haven't gotten there.
I also think one of the real benefits of the work that Dr. Doolin and Dr. Frimmer are doing in this whole process is actually just having the conversation and just having the data to have the conversation. I think oftentimes that in and of itself is an uncomfortable process, and it's one that people aren't really used to. But I think the fact that we're actually leaning into that and have been for the last 18 months opens the door for more receptivity. And one of the things that we've said repeatedly is that this isn't a gotcha sort of an approach, right? I mean, ultimately, our expectation is, whether it's central or satellite, that we outperform the state of Arizona. That's our expectation. So we're not going to get there by gotchas. We're going to get there by having honest conversations and then looking for ways to improve. And then if improvement doesn't happen over a period of time, then have different conversations. But this isn't hey, now this is, and I think that's going a long way too in helping to kind of calm some of the waters and people realizing it really is about raising the efficacy of the whole CTED, not just EVIT Central, the entire CTED. Can I ask a question?
Please.
So, Dr. Frimmer, you have kind of baked in this data for quite some time. In your kind of just general sense, are there any trends, anything that you would like to share that the data kind of jumped out to you as?
I mean, I think there's a few things, and like I said, I won't say it's every district or there's definitely, when you see the green to yellow, that's concerning if it's consistent, because that means everybody's not testing. You know, if everybody's not testing because they were absent or they changed, that's one issue. If they're not testing because we're not testing the kids who are going to fail, that's a different conversation. And so I think getting to the root of that transition between the green and yellow, I think, is one that we would need to have. I think the numbers of students testing I found interesting, because you got 100%, but you only had 5 kids test. Well, that's another conversation, given how costly CTE programs are. I think there's a conversation of how come only 5 students got to the completer class and only 5 students are testing. So that's a trend. And some of them you see very low numbers across the board. And so that's probably one I would see. I think beyond that, like I said, what was interesting, and I think you pointed it out when you talk about exemplars, is it wasn't consistent which programs were struggling. It wasn't like you could say engineering across the board was struggling. There were some schools where engineering was doing exceptional. So it was that, you know, sports medicine did great at one school but not the other. So there seemed to be no consistency. It was really more school by school or teacher by teacher in some cases of where there was a program, which is actually hopeful because it means that it can be achieved, right? If there's somebody doing it to 100%, I found that hopeful in the data. So the consistencies I saw were, the trends were more related to how many students were testing and what percentage of the students were testing.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I was surprised at some of the low numbers of testers that we had in some of these programs, giving the financial cost, when we talk about being fiscally conservative, and making sure that we're doing right by our taxpayers. That was some concerning. How do we get more students into those completer courses and into the industry if they're not making it to that last course, right? That's a concern. But I actually also had, when I looked at the data, I think Tempe is a great example, is you could really see difference between specific schools. So I think as a district, that district has some great data to look at and really understand and digest what is the root cause analysis of those changes. Is it a different student population? Maybe. Could it be as simple as a community importance on CTE? Maybe. So could it be personnel? Absolutely. So those are some of the conversations that I think the districts can have and really look at their data.
So if I could just say two more things, then I'll be done. First, Dr. Doolin mentioned this. I would encourage you, if you haven't, to actually go back through the data, because we just gave you a snippet to really understand how to look at the data. And that snippet wasn't designed to paint a picture one way or the other, but I think as you go through the individual school districts and schools, you get a different sense, and I would encourage you to do that. And secondly, just so people are aware, one of the things I always do in presentations like this, I send it to you on Thursday in a secure, uploaded it to Board Docs in a secure field, so that only you have the data, right? Because I think it's important that you get to process the data before anybody else. But post these meetings, I then post it in the public. You guys talked about it publicly, so it's only just so everybody knows that, you know, we will post this publicly so that it's across the board. But I always make sure that you guys get it first before it's posted publicly.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may. Eventually, is this going to be part of the IGA that they need to perform at a certain level? I would assume not now, but later in the future.
So I think that's a fair question. I think that part of our discussion as we look at what the future is for the IGA, whether it's 3 years from now, 6 years from now, whatever that looks like, I think we will ultimately need to get to a point in time in which collectively there's an understanding that we need to improve not only at Central and Satellite year over year. If how that looks, it may be formulated by a rubric, or it may be formulated through the work that Dr. Doolin and Dr. Frimer are doing with the CTED directors to create something very different. I think that currently in the IGA, the only thing that is required to be a CTE program is what's identified in statute. That has value because it can't, we could have great test scores, but if the teacher's not highly qualified, it's not going to count for CTE. So that matters, but certainly you guys have a duty beyond just meeting those bare minimum statutory requirements. You guys are ultimately responsible for the quality and the content of the CTE programming by statute, right? I mean, that's your duty. And I think what we're leaning into are those indicators. Whether this becomes part of the IGA or not, I think is in time we're going to have to make that decision. But I don't know that it's now necessarily.
I wouldn't say it'd be now, but I would think it would encourage them to have all their students take the test, especially if it's, in there. But I wouldn't expect anything now because you kill the programs probably. But in the future, say, hey, this is what's coming up. This is what we want to do. We need to improve and meet your goals, that we want to be the best in the state.
And this is a conversation we have been having for, are we at 2 years yet?
2 years.
We're at 2 years. So this isn't new. We have been talking with satellites at our CTE directors meetings for 2 years now. This rubric has been available. I think you guys approved it maybe 11 months ago.
Yeah.
A year ago, you approved the final rubric. So this has been out there. We've known it's been coming. So I will tell you, some school districts have already started to make changes because they now had what we were looking at as a board of what the quality, some of the quality indicators you guys were looking for. So we're going to see changes. I think we're going to actually see some surprising changes with the data the next time we run this a year from now.
And I always appreciate that what we do is we look internally first, right? We went down this road first by saying that at the central campus, we're underperforming. And we have got to clean our house before we start talking about somebody else's. And so I think that helps in the conversation because as Dr. Doolin indicated, you look at our automotive program and not only is our TSA scores better than they've ever been, but we're earning more certifications than we've ever earned. It would have been unfair for us to say automotive needs to look better outside the district when our own automotive was underperforming. And so we spent the first couple of years making sure that we were heading in the right direction at the central campus. And now the conversation is lessons learned, how can we help at the satellite level build that efficacy out?
You're correct. We need to be the example.
100%.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, thank you so much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 4, minutes. Do we have a motion to combine and approve items?
I would
for
like to
A&B?
make a motion for this, no, I won't make a motion for the one, I'll wait till B. Excuse me.
Do we have a motion for item 4A?
I make a motion that we approve minutes for item 4A, special meeting minutes, March 20th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any comment or discussion on the special meeting minutes from March 20th? All right, Dr. Metcalf, would you please call the vote by acclamation?
All those in favor of the minutes for 4A for the minutes, special meeting minutes on March 20th, 2025, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
I abstain.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Let's see, 4B.
Now I'll make the motion. Do we accept the regular meeting on minutes for March 24th, except number 9 needs a correction in the motion that it included A through C, and that was for the executive session, that it wasn't in there saying the motion was for A through C with the correction. Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion to
We need a
4B?
second.
Oh, I thought you,
He made the
I
motion.
can't
There was no
second.
second.
Whoops.
oh, I heard a second, I'm sorry.
He said we need a second.
Oh, I thought, okay. Well, who's going to second it?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Dr. Metcalf, can you please call the vote by acclamation?
All those in favor of the special, regular meeting minutes for March 24th, 2025, item 4B, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Okay. Call to the public. Dr. Wilson, do we have any call to the public?
No, sir.
Okay. Consent agenda items. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make the motion, the consent agendas A through L to be accepted or passed or.
Do we have a second?
I make a second that we accept the consent agenda, items 6A through L.
All right. Is there any discussion? Would anyone like anything pulled on the consent agenda items A through L? Okay, hearing none. Dr. Metcalf, can you please call the vote by acclamation?
All those in favor of the consent agenda items, items 6A through L, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
All right. How about item 7, personnel? Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve A and B.
I'll make a motion to combine A and B and approve.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion to
All
combine
right.
and approve.
Thank you, sir. Is there any discussion on item 7? Okay. Dr. Metcalf, can you please call the vote by acclamation?
All those in favor of items 7A and B, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, item 8A for information and discussion, policy revision and regulation revision, first read.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first policy revision is with respect to leaves and absences. When we changed the calendars up, we did not anticipate this little glitch where we didn't differentiate between full-time and part-time staff. Full-time do get personal days, part-time do not, and that's just a clarification. And the regulation change, which this information only, doesn't need your approval, is that instructors can keep teachers on improvement plans for longer than the minimum 45 days if they're showing improvement, and with the superintendent's consent, and that only the superintendent can let someone off of improvement plan early.
Great, thank you. So that is first read. We'll have second read next time around. Let's move to action item 9A, fiscal 25-26 health benefits. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, probably maybe 2 meetings ago, I can't remember, we had a discussion about the health renewal from Kairos and the challenge that was going to bring for us. And we had Mr. Brooks here that is a consultant that came and did some work with us and provided some opportunities and some options. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did is our due diligence in terms of engaging our faculty and staff, but also to continue to work and see if we can't formulate and substantiate and stabilize an approach forward. And so Ms. Perez is going to talk about where we landed and what we're asking approval for. And before the approval occurs, I'd also like, if Mr. Brooks is comfortable, to kind of walk the board through, should you approve, what's the process moving forward, right? Because your approval matters, but also making sure that we have a system in place for staff to do open enrollment. And so it would be helpful to have that. So first, Ms. Perez, if you want to kind of talk through with what we settled on, and then Mr. Brooks, kind of that upload of what we will wind up doing for the open enrollment.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. A little bit of a history regarding procurement for health benefits. Just as a clarification, for a public entity, we have the opportunity to solicit quotes just from public trust, and or we can also go on a formal bid to the market. We are currently covered by Kairos. I apologize. It's our current plan administrator, and we received the renewal at 25% increase for our premiums. Obviously, given the timeline of when we received the renewal, we didn't have the opportunity to go out on a formal bid. Therefore, what we did is we consulted with CAPFI to help us navigate through getting additional quotes from the other providers that are on a public trust. And the responses came back, and we did the evaluation. We came up with the recommendation to transition from Kairos to ASBE, because that gave us the opportunity to not only be able to fully fund the plans like we had been in the past, meaning we offered 3 plans. For the employees, we're fully funding the high deductible plan and also making contributions into the health savings account and the health, the HRA account for the employees. What's important to note is that the increase as opposed to staying with Kairos is 4.82%, and that gives us the opportunity to increase the contribution into the health savings account to offset the increase in the high deductible amount that the deductible amount that the employees will see under the new plan. A little bit of census information: we have 291 benefit eligible employees. Out of those, we have 73 that choose to opt out of our benefit plans. The rest do remain within our plans. We have 3 plans. What the core plan, copay plan, and high deductible are the 3 that we're currently offering. When we solicited additional information on the quotes, we requested that we maintain as close to the current plans that we have possible. We also wanted to take into account, we have the employees that not only themselves, but also their dependents are generally healthy. They're not seeking a lot of medical attention, but we also wanted to ensure that our employees who themselves and or their family members had chronic conditions, that they were also, we were also looking at the needs of both of the scenarios. We also want to make sure that we're looking long-term, and obviously long-term for us would mean that we want to make sure that we go and really explore the market, not just the public trusts that are available. Making this transition at this point would give us the opportunity to fully explore the market within the next 18 months. One of the requests that we made is that ASBATE would guarantee a higher than an 8% increase for that second year, because we wanted to make sure that we're not jumping back and forth. Obviously, we've been with Kairos for about 7 years, and we've seen increases between 3 and 11%. Obviously, this year was an increase to the 25%. Therefore, that's why we're recommending the current transition to ASBATE.
And that, I want to give Ms. Perez a ton of credit because she's done the heavy lifting for the organization. As you can tell, like, she knows what she's talking about, which is wonderful. I think the other part to it is that how then do we ramp up? Should we choose to switch providers? How do we ramp up the open enrollment? And I know, Ms. Rob, you've done some work, I think, kind of on the back end, helping to prepare should the board decide to move in a direction.
Yes, good evening, board members, Mr. President. Thanks for having me again today. Our directive was to create a plan, a strategy, and also a timeline where we could effectively communicate and roll this change out, assuming it's approved. So we've been working, I'd say 2.5, 3 weeks now, creating that message, the strategy, and also the timeline, along with Ms. Perez and her team, to be sure that we're ready to effectively communicate this to your employees, the effective employees, and then also their dependents and children and spouse and partners. So we have crafted essentially what I would call the when, the how, and the why. And so the when is tentatively scheduled to start open enrollment would be around March 1st. We've got some leeway there. It will run for about 8 days. We'll do pre-enrollment communication where we will equip employees with...
Excuse me, can I just make a clarification? You said it begins on March 1st. I'm assuming you mean May?
Yes, we're not time traveling.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies. May 1. I told you I don't like this. So last time.
Just making sure.
Yeah, it brings me, not to talk about another agenda item, but I loved all the data and the performance, and it brings me kind of great grief for my own performance at the high school that I went to, that I have empathy for what I did to the testing scores. So. Yes, May 1. Thank you for clarifying that. And then, obviously, what we'd like employees to do is to know what their options are, right? And so these are big decisions that they'll get to make. And so we have created pre-enrollment material that will be distributed through many different modes of communication. Some of it will be electronic. Some of it will be information that they can view and preview via video. And then we'll also be on site to have informational sessions for folks, both English and also Spanish if necessary. And then the other half of that how is we are building the enrollment system, and you all don't really care what that means, but it's really the how employees make their elections, right? They go on electronically, they decide which plans they want to pick, they add their dependents. And currently that system is owned by Kairos. Right, so it's captive to the Kairos product, and so we've had to build a parallel program that will allow your employees to make those elections. And so we're in the process of doing that. We will test it with Ms. Perez's team to be sure that the data and the information that employee sees when they enroll is accurate. And so we're kind of in the midst of that. And then obviously the why is that these are big decisions for employees, right? And so we know that or we want to equip employees to make an educated decision, not just a decision that they made last year, or not just a decision that their friends made, right? And so we're going to require what's called an active enrollment, where everyone will make an active selection on what they want to do in the next fiscal year. It's very important. People's families change, their risk change, their health changes, and so kudos to EVIT. This is something that you do year over year, but requiring an active enrollment will make that employee make a decision.
So one of the things I'd like to say is, first of all, Rob, you have been incredibly helpful. When we first connected, I was like, oh my gosh, this is arguably one of the worst things I've had dumped on my plate in a long period of time, and you have kind of stepped in and just done a wonderful job helping us to navigate getting to this point. I especially want to compliment you because when we started talking about all this, and I said, well, Rob, if you're going to go to all this work to build all this back-end stuff, and the governing board says, no, we want to stick with Kairos, what does that mean? And he said, well, it just means we did a lot of work for nothing, but it's better to be prepared than to over-deliver than to be underprepared and under-deliver. So I really appreciate you understanding how important that aspect is to us as an organization.
Thank you.
I do have a question on here. Down at the bottom, you have an incentive that employees can do. And what is the on-site biometrics and are equivalent? What does that mean? What do they go through?
I direct that to Ms. Perez.
Yes, that means that they can get their testing done with their medical provider, that they don't have to do the on-site here.
It says on-site. So they can do it either way?
Correct.
That's the blood test and all the other stuff to pass
Yeah.
all these, okay?
Yes.
Because you don't have all the doctors here, but you got a lot of them want to practice.
I do have a question.
Please.
So if there is somebody who, we decide to go with this plan and the employees are looking at this incentive and their blood pressure, for example, is just not at 120/80 and they're going to lose 5 points. So if that's something that isn't their fault, or if it is something that maybe medication isn't correcting, does that lose their opportunity for the $600 incentive payout because it's something beyond their control?
Sure, I can answer that. The points that we look for is 100 points, but we give employees the opportunity worth 190. So if they're lacking in that, perhaps their sugar level is within the range that gives them those extra points.
Okay,
They only need 25 points.
okay. I was just wanting to make sure because there are plenty of issues that are not, I mean, there's choices here, obviously, but I just want to make sure that, blood pressure is one that probably might be a little bit challenging for some people, especially as an administrator, when you're working, your blood pressure
Yes.
goes up all the time.
Well, and to Ms. Perez's points, I mean, it was purposeful to build into there a cushion so that, because really what we want people to do is to be mindful of their health.
Sure.
Because ultimately that's better for them and their family, but selfishly that helps us with our renewal rates. And so there's logic behind it.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And I just want to throw in, we have had through the biometrics screening that we've done in the past, we have had some great results in that things were caught in a biometric screening that we had staff that didn't realize, maybe I have XYZ, and then it prompted them to go to their physician and get the medication example for blood pressure or something along those lines to make their health
Okay,
even
Just
more
Karen Mustard will be
spectacular.
happy.
sounds good. So are you saying you have blood pressure issues? No.
My cholesterol came back as 400.
Oh, wow, okay.
I didn't mean for you to share, John, how. John.
Oh,
Full
dear.
transparency in a public meeting. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
In other news, one of the things that I know we talked about last time was the importance of gathering information from your team around, the potential for this switch and the appetite for doing so. Can you speak to a little bit about what those conversations?
Sure.
were
Ms.
up?
Perez was actually great at hosting 2 different sessions with staff, and she picked kind of a representation of employees. And so some were on the high deductible, some were not on the high deductible, some were certified, some were classified, some were taking the waiver. I mean, she was really methodical in selecting that pool. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about what those sessions kind of were about?
Yes, so what we did is we scheduled a meeting and gave them the information, the plan differences as to what to expect us, as well as the cost differences, to kind of get their feedback and give them the opportunity to really look through the plan and give us any concerns that they may have. I think one of the biggest things, the takeaways that we got was just the appreciation of the recommendation being made that with the increase in the deductible, even though the overall premium was going to be less for the district, that we were taking into an account the fact that the high deductible was going to be increased, so the recommendation to also increase the contribution into the health savings account. There were also additional questions that we received, that we were able to get clarification for. There were concerns regarding the providers, regarding specific clinics, whether or not they were in-network or out-of-network. We had questions as of, are there any out-of-state for those that perhaps have dependents that are currently out-of-state? So we were able to address the majority of the questions that they posed. But overall, I think they were very appreciative of the fact that we're making that recommendation more than anything.
Great, thank you. And if I'm summing this up before we make our motion, so on the pro side, the cost to the district is only projected to go up by about 5% versus 25%, which is what we would anticipate. We validated the ideas with the team, and they've been largely on board, it seems like. I seem to recall that the provider networks were dramatically similar between the two. So what, if anything, am I missing that would be a disadvantage for the district making this move?
So can I tell you what I think a disadvantage would be?
Yeah.
And I've said it from the beginning, and I think it only, and I have had to come to some realizations myself. So my son has a chronic health condition, and so to me, changing insurance is a big deal. The bottom line of the monetary amount matters, but really, the doctor that my son has been seeing since he was 8 years old, I want to make sure he can keep seeing him, selfishly, right? So that part mattered. Truth be told, that I'm an anomaly. The vast majority of people that either don't have a chronic health conditions or don't have family members that have chronic health conditions or aren't at an age in which they're really focusing time on for medical, aren't as concerned about changing healthcare. And so the downside, I think, Mr. Boyle, would be folks like me potentially having to go through the agita of switching providers, even if the doctor's still there. That whole process becomes much more intensified when you have yourself or a loved one has a chronic health condition. The truth is that as we've saw, about 99% of the doctors are crossover between, so that was a huge gap. But to your point, I think the biggest challenge, the biggest downside is anytime you change insurance, you will have folks like me, which is a small percentage, but folks like me that get really worked up because their healthcare matters in ways that it might not necessarily for other people at where they're at in their life at this period of time.
Thank you.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I know.
I'm not sure we made a motion. Did we make a motion?
No.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we, on action item 9, health benefits, that we approve it.
All right, do we have a second?
Mr. President, I make a second to accept item 9A.
All right, is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Dr. Metcalf, can you please call the vote by acclamation?
Absolutely. All those in favor of item 9A, fiscal year 2025-26 health benefits, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
I recuse.
Okay, motion carries.
All right, thank you. Moving on, item 10, call for executive session. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to call for executive session for A and B.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second the motion to combine A and B for executive session.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, Dr. Metcalf, can you please call the vote by acclamation?
Absolutely. All those in favor of executive session for items 10A and B, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed of the executive session for items 10A and B, please say nay. Motion carries.
And
Sit back and vote.
Okay, welcome back. I believe we may have a motion in regards to action item 11B. Is there a motion? I will make the motion to authorize the superintendent and director of legal services to proceed as discussed in executive session. Is there a second?
I make that second.
Is there discussion on the motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
I would like to ensure that we crosswalk the IGAs with the Arizona Auditor General's findings and recommendations to substantiate changes.
And also a consideration for, as we're doing so, to take a look at IGAs between other CTEDs and partner districts across the state as well.
For precedence.
Are there any other comments or considerations in regards to the motion? All right, Dr. Metcalf, can you please take the vote by acclamation?
All those in favor of items 11A and B, please say aye.
Just
Oops.
B, just B.
11B, I am so sorry. All those, let me retract that. All those in favor of item 11A, or 11B as in boy, please say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, please say nay. Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Item 12A, staff reports. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, just a couple quick things for you. We met with Paul Revere, the charter school that is here, the Harris Charter School, just to kind of get an update on how their year is going and how they're forecasting for the next year. And they made an interesting observation. They said they don't think that I've ever invited any of you to go tour that space. So they would extend an offer and have extended an offer that maybe before one of our meetings, if you were interested, that you could work with Ms. Norris and we could arrange a time that you could meet over there and kind of tour that facility so you can get a sense of the good work that they're doing there. Also, just as a reminder, we have some interesting and some fun kind of end of the year events coming up. Thursday, the 1st of May, is our fashion design and merchandise program here on the main campus. If you haven't been to one of those before, it's amazing. Now, is this the one that's in the new building? So part of what we did, not what we did, I didn't do it, part of the redesign in the new building was to create that space so that the hallway actually looks like a runway. And so you get a chance to kind of get into the building that you approved and that you built and see the space being utilized the way it was designed. And so that's May 1st from 6 to 8 here at the main campus. If you're interested, I know Dr. Metcalf, you've responded, please let Ms. Norris know so we can get a head count for you. Also, our yearly video production program, the annual capstone screening event, I've been there, I know Mr. Boyle, you've been, it's really a fascinating event for our students and that kind of showcases the work that they're doing. And if you've kind of followed along some of the student successes we've had, that program is consistently sending students to national conferences and national presentations of their videos. And so that is Wednesday, May 7th at 7 p.m. It's at the Harkins and Chandler Crossroads, so it's a bit of a distance from here, but it's actually pretty easy to get down there. If you're interested, would you please let Ms. Norris know as well, so she can help kind of arrange that for you. And just a reminder, we have our completion ceremonies coming up in, I think, 5 weeks. We're running 3 ceremonies this year because we got too big for 2. And we moved the location to Salt River Fields versus Sloan Park. I would encourage you, if you haven't been to those, that you find 1 or 2 to attend. And again, if you'd like to work with Ms. Norris, that she can arrange kind of making sure that you have the information. But we'd like to get a head count of who can be there so that we make sure that we are being responsive to the needs you might have that night. Other than that, Mr. President.
What are the dates?
I want to say 19th, 20th, and 21st of May.
Great, thank you. Any additional items for 13A closing items? Any additional items for the calendar? Our next date is scheduled for Monday, April 28th.
The studies, was there a study session that you would like to have?
Yes, please.
Okay. What does that, I don't know what that looks like, I mean, honestly. I mean, I know what a study session is, but I mean, do you want to, I mean, would you rather have the meeting just be that? Or do you want to have a separate meeting, Or do you want to have a meeting before the meeting? I mean, I've seen it done a number of different ways, and I
Yeah.
just want to be the most user-friendly to people.
My opinion would be, is it easy for anybody to get here before 5 o'clock for a study session, before our meeting? Is it, I
That
mean,
works.
is that
That works for me.
feasible?
I can do that.
Yeah.
So just kind of maybe do it before
Yeah.
our meeting. Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Okay.
So that would be before April 28th, or before the April
Before the
28th
yeah,
meeting?
meeting.
Okay.
Yes, short answer is yes. Longer answers, on that agenda is when we're supposed to be recognizing.
That is a very large agenda. That's the one where we recognize all of our competitors, CTSO. So
Okay.
it may be that you want to do it the next meeting.
Next
Okay.
one.
The
Yeah.
12th, okay.
Yes.
The 12th would be much better, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's
And
a
that'll
big
give enough
one.
time.
Yeah,
So-
and that'll give us enough time. And the 12th, I mean, this sounds selfish, but we also, that isn't off, so the 12th, yes, the 12th will work much better.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Anything else in regards to calendar?
No, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Your second.
Second.
Please call a vote by acclamation.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who want to hang out here longer, please say nay. Motion